People often ask why Israel is so important in Bible prophecy. It's a tiny strip of land. It's constantly in the news. And the Bible, from start to finish, seems obsessed with it. To understand why, you have to see Israel not just as a country, but as a central character in a story God has been writing since the beginning. It's about promises God made and his determination to keep them. The story of Israel is the story of God's faithfulness. It all starts with one man, Abraham, or Abram, as he was first called. He lived in a place called Ur, in modern-day Iraq. God came to him and made a promise. It wasn't just any promise. It was a covenant, a binding agreement. This is the foundation for everything. It's known as the Abrahamic covenant, and it has three main parts: land, seed, and blessing. First, the land. God promised Abraham and his descendants a specific piece of real estate. He gave them the borders. It runs from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates. This wasn't a vague promise of a nice place to live. It was a specific deeded property from God himself. Throughout the Bible, this land is central. It's where the stories happen. It's where the temple was built. And it's the land the Jewish people have always seen as their home, even when they were scattered across the earth. Prophecy is tied to this specific geography. Second, the seed. This means descendant. God promised Abraham, an old man with a barren wife, that he would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. This promise has a dual fulfillment. It refers to the physical descendants of Abraham through his son Isaac and grandson Jacob, who was renamed Israel. This is the Jewish people. But it also has a spiritual meaning. The Apostle Paul later explains that all who have faith in Jesus, the Messiah, are also spiritual children of Abraham. So the seed is both the nation of Israel and the worldwide body of believers. But the promises made to the physical nation of Israel were never canceled. Third, the blessing. God told Abraham, "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." This is huge. God chose his family line to be a vehicle for his blessing to the entire world. The nation of Israel was meant to be a kingdom of priests, a holy nation that would show the world who God is. Ultimately, the greatest blessing came through them in the person of the Messiah, Jesus. He was a Jew, from the tribe of Judah, a descendant of Abraham. The salvation offered to the whole world came through Israel. This covenant is unconditional. God didn't say, "I'll do this if you're good." He swore by himself. This means God's reputation is on the line. If he fails to keep his promises to Israel, he is not the God he claims to be. This is why Israel is so important. The nation is a living, breathing demonstration of God's promise-keeping character. Later, God made other covenants that built on this foundation. The Davidic covenant is another big one. God promised King David that one of his descendants would sit on the throne forever. His kingdom would have no end. This is a direct prophecy about the Messiah. Christians believe Jesus is this promised king, but his kingdom has not yet been fully established on earth. The prophecy requires a future time when this king will rule the world from a literal throne in Jerusalem. This keeps the focus squarely on Israel and its capital city. Then there's the new covenant. People often think this covenant, which promises forgiveness of sins and a new heart, replaced the old promises to Israel. But look at where it's first mentioned. The prophet Jeremiah says God will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. It was promised to them first. Believers today enter into the blessings of this covenant through faith in Jesus. The promise was originally and specifically for Israel. Its ultimate fulfillment will happen when the entire nation turns to their Messiah. So you have these unbreakable promises about land, descendants, a king, and a new heart, all made to the nation of Israel. The rest of the Bible is the story of how these promises play out and how they will be ultimately fulfilled. The story isn't all positive, though. Along with the promises of blessing, God gave clear warnings. In the books of Moses, especially Deuteronomy, God lays out a choice. If you obey me, you will be blessed in the land. You will be the head and not the tail. But if you disobey me, if you turn to other gods, you will be cursed. You will be defeated by your enemies, and ultimately you will be scattered among all the nations of the earth. This is exactly what happened. The history of Israel is a cycle of turning from God, being judged, crying out to God, and being delivered. Eventually, their disobedience led to a catastrophic judgment. The northern kingdom of Israel was conquered by Assyria. The southern kingdom of Judah was taken captive to Babylon. The temple was destroyed. This was a fulfillment of those curses. They were scattered. Centuries later, after they had returned and rebuilt the temple, they rejected their own Messiah. Jesus stood overlooking Jerusalem and wept because he knew what was coming. He prophesied that the city and the temple would be destroyed again, and in 70 AD the Roman armies came and did just that. They leveled Jerusalem and scattered the Jewish people across the globe. For nearly 2,000 years, Israel ceased to exist as a sovereign nation. The Jewish people were a people without a country. They were persecuted everywhere they went. It looked like the promises had failed. It looked like God was done with them. Many in the church began to teach that the church had replaced Israel, that all the promises made to national Israel were now just spiritual promises for Christians. This idea is called replacement theology, but the same prophets who predicted the scattering also predicted a return. This is a crucial part of the story. God didn't say, I'm going to scatter you and that's the end. He said he would bring them back. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all have stunning prophecies about a future regathering. Ezekiel 37 is one of the most famous. God shows the prophet a valley full of dry bones. They are very dry. They represent the house of Israel, scattered and seemingly dead, without hope. God asks, Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel says, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. And then God commands him to prophesy to the bones. As he speaks, there's a rattling sound. The bones come together. Tendons and flesh appear on them. Then God breathes his spirit into them, and they stand on their feet, a vast army. God explains, I will bring you back to the land of Israel. This is a promise of national resurrection. For centuries, this seemed impossible. How could a people scattered for 2 millennia, with no homeland, no common language for daily use, ever come together and form a nation again? It had never happened before in human history, and then it did. In the late 1800s, a movement called Zionism began. It was a desire among Jewish people to return to their ancestral homeland. After the horrors of the Holocaust, the world was more sympathetic. And on May 14, 1948, the nation of Israel was reborn. Against all odds, the Jewish people were back in their land. Hebrew, a language that was all but dead, was revived and became their national tongue. The dry bones were coming to life. For many who study Bible prophecy, this single event is the super sign of the end times. It's the event that sets the stage for all the other end times prophecies to be fulfilled. Without a nation of Israel in the land, prophecies about its future simply couldn't happen. The return of Israel is not just a political event, it's seen as a direct, modern-day miracle and a fulfillment of ancient prophecy. It tells us that God is not finished with Israel. He is still keeping his promises. This brings us to Israel's role in the present and the future. The Bible describes a period of intense trouble on earth just before the return of the Messiah. This period is often called the Tribulation, or as the prophet Jeremiah calls it, the time of Jacob's trouble. The name is significant. While the whole world will be in turmoil, the focus is on Jacob, which is another name for Israel. It is a time of purification for the nation. During this time, the world's attention will be laser-focused on Israel, and specifically on Jerusalem. The prophet Zechariah says that in the last days, God will make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling and an immovable rock for all the nations. He says all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. Look at the news today. Is there any city on earth that causes more international controversy than Jerusalem? This tiny city is constantly a point of contention. The prophecy seems to be coming true in our headlines. The world is becoming increasingly obsessed with and hostile toward Israel. The Bible also speaks of a future temple. There have been 2 temples in Jerusalem's history. The first, built by Solomon, was destroyed by the Babylonians. The second was destroyed by the Romans. Many prophecies seem to require a third temple to be built. Jesus spoke of an abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. The Apostle Paul wrote about a man of lawlessness who will set himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. For these things to happen, there has to be a temple. Today, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem is home to the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, some of Islam's holiest sites. The idea of a third Jewish temple being built there seems politically impossible, and yet the prophecies are there. The time of Jacob's trouble will be the darkest hour for Israel. A world leader, often called the Antichrist, will rise to power. At first, he will seem to be a friend to Israel. Daniel the prophet says he will confirm a covenant or treaty with Israel for 7 years. This may bring a false sense of peace and security, but halfway through those 7 years, he will break the treaty. He will stop the sacrifices, which implies a temple is functioning, and set himself up to be worshipped. This is the act that triggers the most intense period of persecution the Jewish people have ever known. Jesus said it would be a time of great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. The prophecies say that 2/3 of the people in the land will perish, but a remnant, 1/3, will be brought through the fire. They will be refined like silver and tested like gold. This is the purifying purpose of this terrible time. It's designed to break the nation's pride and self-reliance and cause them to look for their true Messiah. This leads to the climax of the story. As the armies of the world gather against Jerusalem for a final battle, things will look hopeless. And at that moment, Israel will cry out for salvation, and their Messiah will come. Zechariah gives a breathtaking description of this moment. He says the Lord will go out and fight against those nations. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. This is the second coming of Jesus. He returns to the exact same area he left from. And when he comes, something incredible will happen in the hearts of the Jewish people. As Zechariah says, "And I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child." In that moment, the nation will have a collective revelation. They will recognize Jesus as the Messiah they rejected and crucified. Their national blindness will be removed. Paul talks about this in the book of Romans. He says that hardening in part has happened to Israel until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. And so, all Israel will be saved. This doesn't mean every single Jewish person who ever lived. It means the nation of Israel, the remnant that survives the tribulation, will as a whole turn to Christ. Their national salvation will finally occur. This is the fulfillment of the new covenant promise made to them so long ago. And God will forgive their wickedness and remember their sins no more. But the story doesn't end there. After the Messiah returns and saves Israel from its enemies, he will establish his kingdom on earth. This is often called the millennial kingdom, a 1,000-year reign of peace and justice. And where will its capital be? Jerusalem. During this time, all the promises made to Israel will find their complete and literal fulfillment. The land promise will be realized in its fullest extent, with the borders God promised to Abraham, as Israel will be secure in its land, with no one to make them afraid. The Davidic covenant will be fulfilled as Jesus, the son of David, rules from the throne in Jerusalem. The nations of the world will come to Jerusalem to worship the King and learn his ways. And Israel's role as a blessing to the world will finally come to pass. They will be the leading nation. The survivors of the nations will be taught God's law by the Jewish people. Israel will be a nation of priests, fulfilling the destiny God planned for them from the beginning. The world will experience unprecedented peace and prosperity under the direct rule of its rightful king. So, why is Israel so important? Israel is God's prophetic clock. The events happening to and around Israel are signs of the times. The rebirth of the nation in 1948 started the clock ticking in a way it hadn't for centuries. The ongoing conflict over Jerusalem shows us that the world is moving toward the scenario the prophets described. Israel is the evidence of God's faithfulness. If God were to break his promises to Israel, what guarantee would anyone have that he will keep his promises to them? As Paul makes this point in Romans, he asks, did God reject his people? His answer is an emphatic, by no means. Well, God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. His covenants with Israel are still in effect. His faithfulness to them is the bedrock of our own hope. Israel is the center of God's redemption plan, past, present, and future. Salvation came from the Jews in the past through the Messiah. In the future, the world's salvation from chaos and destruction will come when that same Messiah returns to save the Jewish people. The entire biblical narrative revolves around what God is doing with and through this nation. It's not because the people of Israel are better or more special than anyone else. The Bible is very clear about their faults and failures. They were chosen for a purpose. They were chosen to be the vehicle through which God would reveal himself, bring the scriptures, bring the Messiah, and ultimately demonstrate his power, his justice, his mercy, and his unwavering faithfulness to his own word. The story of Israel is the story of a God who makes promises and keeps them even when his people are unfaithful. It's a story of scattering and gathering, of judgment and restoration, of blindness and sight. And it's a story that isn't over yet. The final chapters have yet to be written, but the prophets have given us the outline. And right at the center of that outline is the tiny, contested, and promised land of Israel. To watch Israel is to watch God's plan for the world unfold.